Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to talk about the question, how do you install the Stanley FBB171 full surface hinge? Well, it's a full surface hinge in the sense that it is applied directly to the face of the jamb and the face of the door. I'm sure that much is pretty obvious. But the method of installing the material, how I would go about doing it is, I would get the door put in the jamb and I would have it shimmed on the bottom and on the sides. On the top, I would make sure, well, at least to maintain my margin on the top, I would shim it at the bottom and then have my margin on the hinge jamb and the strike jamb. And I would make sure the door was secure. I would then place my hinge literally over the door and frame, and I would mark my holes. I would then pre-drill all those holes, and I would tap all those holes. Now, having said that, can you drill and tap? Is that going to work? Do you have reinforcement in the door and frame for that? Probably not. If it's a hollow metal door and frame, you won't, because that's not how they're made standard. If it's a hollow metal door and frame, on the door side, you can use through bolts or sex bolts. Through bolting grommet nuts or sex bolts, that would work perfectly. On the frame side, you could use riv nuts. That might be an option. Anything is in play when it comes to installing something. You could technically through bolt it if you had some really long bolts and you drilled through the frame. I've seen people also weld these to the doors and frames. Not necessarily recommended, but there are times when it's the way it's going to be done. But these types of hinges aren't really used on hollow metal. You're going to be looking at an application where you have a channel iron frame and then you're installing into it an otherwise standard door. So in that channel iron frame where it's a 1/4 inch thick, sure, you're going to drill it, that mild steel. You'll tap it for your 1224 screws, and that's how you'll install it. Let's take a closer look at the supporting information. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. So here are some Stanley full surface hinges. Let's look at the 5-inch version that you're looking at. And let's just take a look at the drawings that we have here. So what's important to note, and the reason I want to jump into the drawing, is a couple of things. First of all, the location of the holes on the door leaf, and the door leaf is the wider leaf, because you have an entire door that you can install those on. The narrow leaf is the frame where you have a narrower amount of real estate to install them on. You'll note that you're 1.5 inches over from the vertical axis of pivoting, the E dimension, and that you are 1 inch over on the frame. Well, the important part about the door leaf and the sex bolts that I had mentioned earlier, and we'll take a look at what those look like. Sex bolts will look like this. You'll have a female and then a male sort of application. They go together like this. Your screw will come through here. When you tighten down those sex bolts, because of the design and the length of all this, you won't crush the door down at all. Okay? Lots of me talking ad nauseum, admittedly, on sex bolts there. The point is that it's 1.5 inches over, which means you're not going to have a problem. You're not going to have a problem awful drawing, I apologize. Getting that installed, because your bolts will come somewhere over here, meaning they're not going to come over here, and because this stop projection is 5/8 of an inch, they'll get over here. So you'll have no problem with that. And through bolting it is likely what you'll end up doing. And if you do order these hinges and you know you're going to sex bolt them, be sure to order the sex bolts separately. They're not going to include them. That part number is C970. Actually, that's the wrong part number altogether. I'm going to navigate you to the proper part number. The reason it's the wrong part number is this is a 1/4 20 bolt, and these screws are going to come 1224. The other important aspect of the width of the jamb leaf is that, your dimension, even if you had an extremely narrow frame, you're still going to be able to get this all installed. So the short leaf will be the the jam side. If you've got a hollow metal door, that's probably going to be a 2-inch frame. If you have a channel iron, it's probably much wider than that. Again, drilling and tapping. But the other important aspect is right here. The fact that the leaves are not parallel with each other. They won't lay flat on the surface of the door and frame. The reasoning is because the door is inset. And that inset is evidenced here. Inset is the dimension from the face of the frame to the face of the door. And the way that that is bent here, the way that the bend and the length of the leaves allow for that inset. Now, the inset on a hollow metal door is generally about 3/32 of an inch. They're giving you 1/8 of an inch here. That would make perfect sense. Having an inset application would be standard, and that's how you would install these. Okay, they do, I stand corrected, they do include, for the door leaf, 2-inch, 1/4-20 oval head machine screws with a grommet nut. Okay, what does a grommet nut look like? Well, let's take a closer look at what the grommet nut looks like. Let's just do that now. We're going to open up the link here to the manufacturer's page. Open up the 2010 Architectural Hardware Catalog. Let's search for grommet. Here we go. This is exactly what will be for the door side. That's a grommet nut. I would very much prefer their sleeve nut and machine screw, but that hinge is obviously going to be prepped for 1/4-20 in terms of the size of the countersink. So you could order some 1/4-20. Actually, what you could order that would work would be, I'm going to give you the part number in case you want to order them as sex bolts, and then I'll explain why you might want to order them as sex bolts. Okay, that part number could be 8025, and this first one that comes up. This is a 1/4-20 bolt. Why you would want a sex bolt is because of the length of this area here. As you install that, through your door, again, as you tighten the screw over here, you won't crush the door in, because this shoulder is preventing that inside face of the door from being crushed in. Well, I should say the outside face. This would be on the inside. That's just a sketch I did many years ago just to illustrate what it looks like. So you could use the 8025 because it's already coming with 1/4-20 bolts, which means the hinge itself is going to be drilled and countersunk for a 1/4-20, not a 12/24. Okay. I don't know that I would want to use the grommet nut because I could over-tighten that and crush the door down. Should you have reason to believe that your door is insufficient in terms of gauge or construction, that you want to have a piece of steel to spread out all of that force when you tighten everything, you can order the BP-1 hinge plate, and it will go on the side opposite of the hinge, and the bolts will run through these holes and just spread that out via surface area. That would work out pretty well. Okay. Outside of that, I can't think of what else to say in terms of installing them. It really depends on the composition of the door and frame and then what fasteners you would use. You want to weld them? Have at it. You know, it's going to make a secure installation. The problem with welding it makes it awfully difficult to service the hinge. And the next person, 1, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, better have a die grinder to get them off. So it's quick, fast, and easy if you can weld, but long term, it's the cost of ownership on that is, people will say, I don't want to drill and tap these holes. I don't have an hour. I'm just going to weld it. I get that. I can weld. I can also drill and tap, and I've also been the guy 10 years later who have arrived at the job site to find the hinges were welded on, and now I'm there for an hour cutting hinges off. Comes back the same way. Let's wrap up this video on camera. So I thank you for the question. If I've not answered the part of the question that you were hoping to have answered, reach back out. I'd be happy to refine this response. If you have any questions on the Stanley FBB171 full surface hinge or any other Stanley product, a Hinge that I'm partial to because their fit and finish, their quality is extremely good. Please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.